I can't tell you how many women are like sharing their stories with me. They're like, "Oh, yeah, I got out of a divorce and I got remarried, and man, I thought I knew him. Then all of a sudden he was just acting like the last man I was with." And some of these people will sit there and blame, that person over and over again. But it's like, yeah, you can definitely hold them accountable for what they have done and they have lied to you or whatever. But you need to hold yourself accountable to be able to see through these things. You can't just keep drifting through life on autopilot and not reflecting on yourself. And that's not an easy task.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Through the Mirror. This week we are going to talk about manipulation, and with everything going on in the world, whether it be politics or what have you, it's just a good thing to be able to talk about this and start learning how to see through different types of manipulation and start getting into that field of it there. Andrea, where do you think would be the best place to start on breaking down manipulation for people?
I think you can just look around in society and you can see it all the time. I guess if you know how to spot it, some of it's very obvious, when everyone's telling you the Epstein files aren't relevant now, even though they're very much so relevant, or down to, someone in your life manipulating you on a personal level. Let's just say if you don't do XYZ, I'm not doing this, and everything is confusing. So, I mean, we could start anywhere. I guess you can pick personal level or broad spectrum level.
Right. I mean, that's even a great point right there because gaslighting's one form of manipulation, right? But it looks different whether it's on the big stage, like political, like you talk about Epstein. Epstein, they've been gaslighting the American people on the Epstein stuff for, years now. It's gotten really bad in the past months, but that looks different and people have a hard time, deciphering it between the two because it just looks different on a personal level when it's, whether it's a partner or somebody in a personal relationship.
I think manipulation is harder to spot the closer you are to a person, the more you have your blinders on. You want the trap of seeing the potential in everyone. Those situations is actually where manipulation may be harder to spot, depending on if you know what to look for or what you are going through or how you see the world. That all depends. And manipulation comes in a lot of different forms and some extreme, others subtle. So it just depends.
Right. I mean, there's like, let's go the personal level here. I mean, I'd say one of the first ones is like the guilt tripping, like just guilting and preying on, people's empathy, loyalty in the relationship, or, somebody being hopeful, but the whole guilt manipulation, making other people responsible for your emotions. And I mean, some of that stuff, some of the more really obvious ones are like, after all I've done for you, or if you just loved me, you would do this for me. I guess I'll just suffer, like it's like putting it like, okay, yeah, you can do this, but it's going to make me feel bad if you do this or don't do this,
Mhm.
and just using that whole guilt trip to get what you want. Like that's just a very basic thing, but like you said, the closer you are to somebody, like the harder it is to pick up on that because of that, that level of empathy. If there's some stranger on the street, people do that. There'll be people on the street corners, begging for change and beggars, and people will be like, yeah, that doesn't really pull on my heartstrings like my partner who's saying they're going to be upset if I do this. So guilt, that guilt manipulation is, I think, one of the most common ones and even one of the most sneaky ones because that just preys on that loyalty and that, the love you have for that person. And I think even a lot of people even do it without even noticing they're doing it in the first place.
Manipulation most of the time is a mask for someone either trying to hide who they are or they've learned to manipulate to survive. So there's all kinds of different patterns with it. Like you can have the master manipulator, the person that goes out and they're always saying how great they are, looking for validation, but secretly, their entire life is a lie. Like they'll go out and go out of their way to make it look like there's something they're not. and they'll interact with people that way. Like, for example, you ever see the people that use the passive aggressive, not so funny humor where it's like someone will respond with like maybe, "Oh, I didn't I didn't get that," and they'll turn around and go, "Oh yeah, because you're so stupid." But it's not really funny. And a lot of people will fall for that or not see through that or feel a certain way, but not listen to why they feel a certain way and just go, "Oh yeah," and laugh along with it because they
Hmm.
feel uncomfortable. And over time, that can become a repeat pattern to where you get desensitized to someone manipulating you or maybe having some really messed up intentions with you or not having your best interests at heart because they're subtly telling you what you should know about them without realizing it, maybe.
No, that's and that's normally in like a public or a group setting where you're, at the expense using quote unquote somebody's shortcomings or something like that to,
Mhm.
you know, get validation, attention, approval from the other group of people is, yeah, that's a really low blow. Again, that's even, I think that's also a level of that guilt manipulation because, you'll find that, oh, well, you should know this, or else we wouldn't be making fun of you
Mhm.
about this. So and people prey on that all the time. And I
Mhm.
see that in a very passive way where people aren't really picking up on it, or, the people that it's being done to, whether it's a thing that's happened numerous times, growing up, to where they start to laugh at it. They start to laugh at people belittling them and genuinely will start to find it funny, even though on a subconscious level, you're just beating yourself down, which is almost, I would say it's almost, that's worse than even the other person doing it. Cause now you're putting yourself down too. Like, well, you're
Mhm.
destroying your own self-worth, your own self-confidence. And just, yeah, that goes to another level too, even outside of the manipulation.
I think that like a more darker, probably more known form is like the abusive relationship dynamic where, you'll have a spouse and be a man or a woman that's staying in a like very either very physically or emotionally or both when it comes to abuse. And you'll hear, "Oh, well, he said he wouldn't do it again." And like they have like this nonstop, "Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way." And you kind of get into this pattern, but then the next day they turn around and they're doing it again. And then they're blaming you for their behavior to mask it.
Well,
So
and
this is
that
where,
sorry only comes if they're called out. They'll never go, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Like, they never offer up an apology for doing something like that. It's only if something is said and they look bad with it.
that's not really an apology. But I think there's dynamics like that where you can point it out, or, even in religion, like, a majority of all religions, if you have some of the more, I guess, I don't know, we could talk about all these things all day with different religions, but I'll just use Christianity. There's a majority of Christianity where it's you do XYZ and prove your love to God, but God's love is unconditional. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if you live your life in alignment spiritually and you follow like the example of Jesus, of course things are going to go a certain way and you're not going to be a manipulator because you would be following that path. But in the religious side of it that's been twisted, it's you're never good enough, you're always a sinner, all these things. And it's like portraying that kind of like, I'll use the term the narcissistic codependent relationship, right? The back and forth. Like you're portraying that you're serving and following a God that doesn't have your best interests in mind, and nothing is ever good enough, but it's always your fault if you come short. And I think religion really portrays that. I know even in like Islam, some of that's portrayed by certain people that twist it. You can go down the list. So that's another example. Like nothing is ever good enough, and it's all about control because the world has used religion for years to control people. It's not really
Right.
about the spirituality, it's about control. So if they convince you that you're bad enough, you're never good enough, you have to just keep trying no matter what happens, no matter what is going on in your life. We're just going to keep insisting that you're a piece of crap, but you have to follow us. And that's not love, right?
Right.
So manipulation comes in that form too. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have even talked to me about how I was told for years if I didn't do XYZ, I was going to hell. So even if it was hurting me, I did it. Well, I didn't get a divorce, even though my husband or my wife was horrible to me because someone told me that I was going to go to hell for getting divorced. So that in itself is manipulation in a form of control. That's a very blatant example I could
Well,
use.
that's what essentially, if you really boil it down to, that's what manipulation is attempting to control somebody else and
Mhm.
control an outcome for your own benefit, whatever that benefit is. And you see that, in a lot of the Abrahamic religions, that there's a common theme, especially with the whole hell, lake of fire, damnation, whatever. It's, well, you can do whatever you want. You have free will, but you choose this and you're gonna suffer for eternity, like what? That's not again, that's a fear-based tactic. You better get in line or you don't want to spend eternity in suffering and damnation and stuff like so it makes it that's where I really separate the whole spirituality with religion thing because if there's a manipulation and trying and control there, if you have to, put strike fear into somebody to get them to believe something, then how is it so good and amazing,
Well,
right?
and I think this even further, you're not allowed to question. So, and I think that's where it comes into play. Like you can go back to you in the relationship dynamic. Hey, you say you love me, but you're treating me like this. Well, it's your fault that I'm treating you like this. Like that's an example. And then you have the person confused. If they don't see through this, then they're looking at themselves like, oh, I'm the problem. What can I do better? And whilst the other person here is manipulating them and using them, and they don't love them, right? Because if you love someone, you wouldn't deliberately harm them. And don't get me wrong, some people are in denial and they create realities that don't exist. And there's even forms of manipulation that are completely different than even that dynamic, because there's manipulation where you have learned to self-implode and self-sacrifice, where you won't tell someone exactly what you mean, or you won't tell them what you want because you're afraid of the outcome. So you'll tiptoe, dance around, you'll say you meant something else, or in an abusive relationship, you will keep the peace at whatever cost, whatever it
Right.
may cost you. Like someone's abusing you, saying horrible things to you, screaming at you, and you'll tell yourself, and you'll just say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It is all my fault. And you'll manipulate in that way to de-escalate a situation to prevent further harm. And that's where these kind of situations get really, really dark and can lead to a very messy path, because now you have someone that's going to enable the abuse to stay safe, well, believing that it keeps them safe, but it doesn't. And the other person is going to continue to do more and more and lead that down a darker path. So I think this is the problem. Same with religion, same with politics, same with everything we're seeing in the world. It's a very, very dysfunctional dynamic, and it leads to destruction either way for both sides.
Right, and then that dynamic you're talking about, I mean, gaslighting just thrives in that, which is another major form of manipulation that we're seeing in relationships now, where you literally have somebody distorting reality
Mhm.
and getting somebody to question their own reality, whether it be in conversations, oh, I never said that, or, you're exaggerating. That's not what happened. All right, this is actually what happened. And you literally start confusing the person to the point of they start questioning themselves, like, wait, did I remember this wrong? And they literally start feeling crazy. And I mean, that's one of the darker forms of manipulation, in my opinion, is when you're literally getting somebody to question their own reality to where they don't know which way is up or down. And I mean, that's rampant and, these abusive relationships. I mean, if you have, especially on the abuser's side, it's not that bad, or no, you're imagining that, or oh, this person had it, we're okay, everything's going to be okay, we're just having a hiccup, we're just having a snag in the road, and go on a broader scale. I mean, we've talked about it numerous times on the show of how, the government's gaslighting the American people. I mean, something we're talking about
Breadcrumbing,
yeah,
breadcrumbing.
breadcrumbing, gaslighting, the whole nine yards. But I mean, you see this. The big thing right now is the Epstein files. You had the Pam Bondi talking about how they didn't exist at one point, and now it's like, oh, there's 3 million pages of the Epstein files that just the people are talking about. It would take years upon years upon years for a single person to read all this stuff. Like there's that much, but not too long ago you were trying to tell the American people that they didn't exist when even before that you said they exist. So you're literally trying to get hundreds of millions of people to question their reality. Like then that's on a massive scale of gaslighting, and then
Mhm.
you know, people will fall for it.
Mhm.
And whether it's because, again, like you said, there's the other form of manipulation where somebody will just, if they're being abused or somebody's getting really mad, they'll just, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Just try and feel safe in the situation. You saw that on another scale with the whole Epstein files too. It's just like, well, okay, so we're okay then. Pedophiles aren't running things, so we're just okay. Guys, don't say
Yeah,
the
Trump
guys. They
said
said
so.
yeah, like you have that side of it coming out of the gaslighting, so you like it's literally the same thing if you can get out of the super specific situation. It looks the same. It looks the same.
I would say that, like, even how, I mean, I guess the larger powers of the world are set up are built on that manipulative dynamic. They're counting on them to have unfettered power and they do these things. And then when people get mad or angry, they distract, they breadcrumb. Breadcrumbing is when they go, oh, well, here's a little win for you. So you'll stop yelling at us. Here you go. You happy
Right,
now? Just for a little
right,
bit, even though we're destroying society, we're leading you down a bad path, we're doing wrong things. So that's like a perfect example. And I think that's why manipulation is being talked about more. And then you can see it like even at the media, you can see it with, there's just too many examples to go over. But then there's like the subtle forms of manipulation where you're in a very close relationship and you never knew anything different. Like there's those too. If you're a child and you grew up in that, you might think, if you're the brunt of that, you're going to go, oh, this is normal. This is just how everybody is. Everybody just screams at each other and we all like get quiet and try to fix everything. So if someone stops screaming or, I'm gonna sit here and do all these different things to get everybody to be okay and calm. And then you have the person that's always regulating emotions and you can have codependency can come out of that situation where someone never speaks up for themselves and never even knows how to live on their own or for themselves because they're used to being in this very intermittent reinforcement situation. And even
right,
if they leave the situation and don't have that recognition, they'll repeat that pattern again. That's why you see people like, oh, I got divorced and I got with someone new, but they ended up being the same kind of person down the road. How did I end up here again? Because you never recognize the patterns. And those patterns repeat and they can repeat in different ways. It can spill out onto your children if you grew up in that dynamic and you didn't recognize it, and then you have your own children, you can end up repeating the pattern and making it normal for them. And it's
right,
a very rampant issue because you can see how if people could see through manipulation on the levels they need to learn, a lot of things going on in society would not be tolerated. Nobody would sit here and go, oh, yeah, I believe that. Definitely. Or I'm going to sit here and fight over religion and politics all day instead of see that this is being a tool to divide. And don't get me wrong, you should speak up when things are wrong, especially when you can see through it. But you see this all the time. And like since time began, like how long have we been fighting over whose religion is better? To where people are killing each other over land and a special piece of land in the desert somewhere and all these things where human life and lives alone never mattered. It's just about taking control, having
right,
power, and then using something that was supposed to be beautiful and to help people find their inner world and guide them and using it to destroy people. I mean, that's manipulation. That is what religion is. That is what it's become. Don't get me wrong, there's people that have spiritual practices and they do it for themselves and they're kind and they really live up to it. But for the most part, when you're sitting there having it put in your face, oh, if you don't do X, Y, Z, God doesn't love you, then how can you say it's unconditional love? That's manipulation.
right. Well, and then you see with that people playing the victim a lot, which is
Hmm.
another manipulation thing where I mean you see it on the all the way up in governments and then of course on the personal level, like if whenever there's somebody's caught with their pants down or doing something, it's immediately a victim card in a lot
Hmm.
of cases because then it shifts blame. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
well, I reacted that way or I did that because this happened to me. This is why I did that. It's not my fault. Like
Hmm.
it's so that goes back to the preying on empathy,
Hmm.
preying on people's empathy and the sympathy for that people will give them if they play the victim. I mean, look at look at certain figure certain, politicians who maybe survived, an assassination attempt or something, and then oh, well, it's okay what they've done because somebody took a shot at them. Or, if somebody had a rough childhood and was treated poorly by their parents, then if they act a certain way with their partner or their children or something, it's like, well, you just don't understand. I was abused as a child. I was this or that, and that's the way I am. And that like that somehow makes it okay. And people will be, yeah, I am. They'll even sometimes people will apologize. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. I understand. We'll try and tiptoe around what you're doing to us because of what was done to you, which is just it's really abusive when you get down to that too, because you're asking people to accept abuse because that should never be theirs, accept pain that should never be theirs to carry because of pain that you have. So you're
Hmm.
putting your pain on other people because you can't handle it, which
I mean,
is
it's also taking away responsibility and ownership, or even, you have a lot of people like our age that in their 30s and 40s and they're still blaming their parents for their lives. And it's
right.
not invalidating to say that if you had a bad childhood, that, yeah, that contributed to you and what you've had to go through and change. But after you're on your own, like blaming's not going to fix anything, or
Right.
they return and retaliate against their parents for what they did. They become what they say they hate. I
Mhm.
mean, this happens a lot too. So, and then you have more master manipulators, and these dynamics continue, and they don't end until someone says, you know what, I'm going to recognize that this is destructive. And then I want to be able to see through it so I don't keep repeating this over and over again. I mean, I can't tell you how many women are like sharing their stories with me. Or they're like, oh, yeah, I got out of a divorce and I got remarried. And man, I thought I knew him. Then all of a sudden he was just acting like the last man I was with. And some of these people will sit there and blame, that person over and over again. But it's like, yeah, you can definitely hold them accountable for what they have done and they have lied to you or whatever. But you need to hold yourself accountable to be able to see through these things. You can't just keep drifting through life on autopilot and not reflecting on yourself. And that's not an easy task. But if you can see through manipulation, you can navigate all aspects of life better, because then you're not going to just fall for stuff hook, line, and sinker. And that goes in every aspect. That goes for your spiritual choices, your family dynamics, your political view, all these things kind of start coming together into a reality instead of fiction, because manipulation seeks to give you fiction in order to control you.
Right. Well, and I feel like people really need to understand this. There's never a good reason for the abusive behavior, the gaslighting, the victim mentality, the excusing, their actions. Just because you can sympathize or have empathy for somebody's situation or what they went through, you like you said, you have people in their 30s and 40s who are still blaming their parents for everything, their situations for everything. Like people's parents aren't holding their hands, controlling their mouths. They are. They have to take ownership and accountability. And if you truly loved somebody, no matter how difficult it is, you would start dealing with those issues, dealing with what you went through, and stop working on stop projecting it on those closest to you, because that's not theirs to carry. That's yours to carry and work through and deal with. And and you're talking about people, especially women, going into these relationships and like, oh my gosh, I this is like my ex, this is the next person I'm it's just like the person I was just with and got out of an abusive relationship. And people don't understand that, like, there's another form of manipulation is that love bombing to control. And love bombing preys so hard on people who are wanting to be swept off their feet, who are looking for a savior
Mhm.
or a knight in shining armor to get them out of the dungeon and make their life better because they're not happy with their life. So if somebody can come and just save them, things will be okay. And love bombing is such a common tactic amongst, manipulators and relationships, because it makes it's so easy. And we've talked about, childhood trauma and stuff like that on the show, and it's actually, I mean, everybody has trauma. Everybody has something going on. So if you haven't worked through that, love bombing can be a very effective tool to feel like, oh, I'm seen. I feel seen. Somebody gets me. Somebody's showering with love. I'm being accepted and I'm being cared about. And I haven't felt that. I can't even accept myself. So the fact that somebody else accepts me just, it's that emotional high of it all. But inevitably, the love bombing goes away. It stops. And then you're left with what went wrong. And people need to understand, like, this excessive love bombing tactic is a major red flag, and people need to start recognizing what love bombing looks like and recognize exactly how that comes about. I mean, it's almost like those things that say if it sounds too good to be true,
Mhm.
it's probably love bombing. If a guy walks up to you and he's known you for 48 hours and you're just the most gorgeous woman I've ever seen in my life, like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I'm not doubting that he thinks you're beautiful and attractive, but you're overdoing it to, again, make her feel special and get her attention. Oh, you've been together for a week. Hey, let's move in together. Whoa, excuse me? What? Like, there's certain red flags that people mistake for, oh my gosh, this is just so intense and awesome, to no, that's not. People who have, a level head or set up, like, actually want to have feelers, want to see if there's compatibility. And there's a lot of milestones that you kind of want to hit before you're doing certain things. And if people are just rushing through that and being like, hey, you're it, you're gonna be it for the rest of our lives. I've known you for a month and I'm gonna ride this high. It's like,
Mhm.
people need to be able to see those red flags. And
I would say further that you can't have real love and control. Like in that way, like love can't exist in an environment where everything is like controlled and manipulated anyway, because it's always a transaction. Manipulation itself is a transaction. If you do XYZ for me, then you love me, then it's not love. So I think that being also, that's like an own inner journey, but to actually understand what love is and what does that look like. We talk about this, it's a little off topic, but people are always talking about, oh, it's the feminist fault that the world's set up this way, or it's the misogynist fault. But for example, everyone's always talking about, toxic masculinity. And, I would say that the term toxic masculinity kind of is a disservice because I know we use it to recognize, but I'll also say that toxic masculinity is kind of manipulation, manipulative man, the manipulative male figure. Real masculinity doesn't have manipulation. So when you look at society, I was reading some comments on the post the other day, and I was kind of shocked by what the person was saying because I thought maybe he was different than that. But he was on there, oh, if women were more supportive of men and did their part this way, and was just going off a list. And I was sitting there thinking, yeah, well, that's true. Everyone has to take ownership here. If we had real masculinity and strong, compassionate, empathetic men running society, women would naturally be in a safe space. So when it comes to having this, manipulation, the nice guy mask kind of situation we have going on, and women too, like you have the manipulative patterns in like the feminist movement. You can't have that loving partnership that could exist in society. So I feel like that's another reason people are talking about this more because everyone's waking up a little bit and going, something really is wrong. This is getting really bad. And it's like coming to an implosion. Like it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Then the more aware you become of it, the more you're like, okay, why is this so normal? It's so normalized. Like, yeah, sure, we can have the extremes of narcissism and codependency and all the different little angles with that. But just in general, society is set up to thrive in
right,
this. So how can you have like a strong foundation for a country, for a society, for communities, if they're being built basically on one of the darkest things in existence, right?
Well, and if you got both sides trying to manipulate the other out of a sense of, not feeling safe, then you're you're not you don't trust the other person. And how is there going to be any type of connection or closeness in that dynamic at all? And that goes for both sides of
Hmm.
it. You got, like you said, men wanting to women, well, you need to be supportive and this and that. Well, how can she be supportive if she's always having to play mommy to you because
Hmm.
you're not giving her containment and the space to actually feel safe to then turn around and support you from that place of safety. And
Or,
then you're
like more women that want a dad, like I want you just to let me be reactive and spiral on you, and it's the opposite thing, right? It might look
right.
different, but there's no ownership, no accountability, no learning to find your balance, take responsibility for your own behavior.
Well, and there's I was about to say that's the other side of it. If you didn't have a dad or a strong father figure and you're looking for a dad, oh, I just want you to pay the bills. I want to go do what I want to do, not better myself, not grow, not pursue my own things, not allow myself to trust what you're doing. I just want taken care of. There's a difference between a man offering containment for a woman to where she can rest and feel safe in the relationship
Mhm.
and somebody who's playing dad, just paying all the bills and making sure you don't have to do anything. Like there's
Or
a
being a
distinct
doormat.
difference.
I mean, this can go both ways. I just want to say, like, it's not just
Right.
exclusive to one side. I mean, it goes both genders do it, right? But I think there's just a really deep problem here because even, I was watching some doctor talk about a study about, one of them was women faking orgasms, okay? Like it's a common thing. And the reason being, again, is because a lot of the women in the interview are like, well, if I don't, he's going to feel really bad. And it's like, okay, so you don't have a safe space to talk to your partner about what would maybe work better for you. And so you can be more connected and together. And then obviously the male in the situation isn't considering that maybe what he's doing or taking from the situation isn't in authenticity and honesty. So then you wonder why all these relationships, that's just one part of a relationship, but that's a big deal. And you wonder why people don't feel connected and they don't, and everything is a transactions, right? Or you can never talk about
Mm,
your feelings. There's no space to go, hey, I'm feeling this way without someone blowing up in your face.
right.
So even though that woman might not be being malicious by not telling the truth there and manipulating the relationship to keep it stable, it's still hurting her and him in the long run, right? That's not even dark manipulation. That's not like, oh, I'm a narcissist and I want to control and destroy your life. That's just
Right.
someone going, I don't know what else to do here, but I don't feel safe. So I'm going to choose what feels easier and not be honest. And then we wonder why this is happening. And I know it sucks, but we need to start being able to have those hard conversations. And if you're not with someone and you're not in a situation where you can't have hard, honest conversations or open dialogue, then that's not healthy. That's not connecting. Same with, our country, like the United States of America. If you can't have honesty about what is going on and you're supposed to cheer for your side and your team, how can you ever find change? How can you ever find a path forward? Because everything is built on manipulation and lies. So, as a society, as human beings, we can't thrive in this kind of dynamic. We can't thrive and grow because, in the end of the day, no one's going to push you. And then someone's either going to enable you or try to control you.
Right. Well, and those tough conversations, like, and this is where you have a healthy relationship. Tough conversations are supposed to pull you closer because if you have two emotionally mature people who can sit there and be like, you know what, this is difficult. I don't like this. I know you don't like this. We both feel uncomfortable. This sucks, but I'm going to be vulnerable with you. And I know you love me. And I know you have my best interests at heart, and I have your best interests at heart. So I'm going to, in a sense, expose this vulnerable part of
Mhm,
myself and be like,
mhm.
you're not going to hurt me, even though I feel like this is hurts, but you're not going to be malicious about this. That creates closeness. That creates connection.
Mhm.
So when you're having to, like you said, with the, women faking orgasms, I saw a study a couple weeks ago. They found like there's like it was between 20 and 30% of men are doing it, and there was never a study done on men, but there's study that men are doing it too. And it wasn't even because she's going to be upset. It was men feeling like they would be viewed as less if
Mhm.
they weren't in a position where they can do that, because that's a stereotype. That's a stigma on men that, well, that's what man can't do that. What man, has a problem with that. So, you have that same exact thing where you're manipulating in order to feel safe instead of being vulnerable, which, like you said, that's not really a dark, malicious thing
Mhm.
that they're doing. That's coming from a wounded place of just not wanting, like, I can't be seen. That's, more like a shame thing instead of trying to necessarily control somebody.
Mhm.
That's that's more of the defensive, ooh, don't look at me type thing. Look, hey, look over there.
Mhm.
You see parents do that with their kids when they're, hey, what's that over there? Sneak a bite of candy or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's people need to understand that this whole thing is coming from a wound, and we talk a lot about trauma and even childhood trauma and stuff on this show. A lot of this stuff becomes a symptom of a problem from that. Even the darker things, the gaslighting and stuff like that, is still a symptom of those problems. If you look at, I don't want to say innocent, but one of those less malicious, dark, manipulative things that, people don't really might not really notice, is manipulation
Mhm.
because of pain. If you can start looking at have the awareness of it and go, oh, why am I doing that?
Mhm.
Why am I scared of my partner to know that about me, or know that I'm struggling about that? Why do I have to hide that? That's some of the first steps into, having that invitation for connection, and to be vulnerable and be like, oh, maybe I should trust this and start working on stop letting my past dictate my now. Said
Mhm.
there's
Yeah.
people in their 30s and 40s who are, still blaming what happened when they were 10 years old on why they can't, have a tough conversation with somebody close to them. It's like, okay, when is that going to stop controlling your life? When are you going to let that be in the past and give something a chance, because it's not going to get any better running from it.
And I just like to add too, don't get me wrong, there is some manipulation that, like, something as funny as what you just said about, hey, look over there with your kids. Maybe there's a woman with her boobs out. There is healthy,
Right.
very easy understanding here that there are some forms of manipulation that are necessary. Or if you're a woman or a man in a very domestic violence situation and you're planning on leaving, yeah, you better play your hand well and you better manipulate well, or that person might kill you or might do something harmful. Then
Right.
yeah, there's a place for strategy and knowing how to use manipulation in a way to survive. But this can't be a lifelong thing, and that can't become who you are, because there's a lot of people, especially people that survive abuse, where they got used to surviving so long and regulating emotions and being in this pattern that now it's become a part of their identity. So they never really, yeah, everything's fine, and they wear a mask, and they're stuck in that. And even
Right.
same with someone that could come out of, like, say, it's rare, but come out of something like narcissism. Now they have to come out of that by being very aware of what's going on inside their head, and not in a way where you're overthinking and overanalyzing, but you're standing outside of your mind and going, is that reality? And same with even someone coming out of codependency, all these things, like, you have to sit there and really reflect on what is reality. And that's not going to be comfortable, especially if you've lived and made either a safe space or a fake reality, or, you have the person think so on the best thing that ever happened to humanity when they were probably one of the worst, because they painted that reality inside their head. So you have to break these false realities, these false identities, to even make a path forward. And it's not easy. And we don't really get taught these things, at least in Western society, because, for example, you bring up mindfulness to some of, like, the really strict Christian minority, and they act like you're talking about exorcism. No, I mean, we can talk about where Jesus said, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So, I mean, we can go down the list. There's a big list of things where being mindful isn't sitting there and labeling and overthinking and then overanalyzing, but being mindful of what are you thinking? What is reality? I have a friend that said this, but learning to observe your mind and emotions. You don't have to become everything you think and feel. You don't have to react and you don't have to suppress, because that's another thing is, like, we talk about not reacting to our emotions, but what about when we think we're not reacting, but we're just suppressing by pretending we're not reacting? But you still owned and took on that emotion. You still owned and took on that thought. So, I mean, this is another way where you have to learn those patterns about yourself to heal and to move on from manipulative patterns and from things that are either abusive or self-imploding, self-sacrificing to the point of non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, when you really get down to it, I mean, most people think that the world, their being is their mind. Like that's become a very common thing that everything I think, everything that comes into my mind, living in your mind is one of the most common things in the world. I don't even think that's just Western society. That's
Mm,
just a
these other
it's
parts of the
it's
world have it down a lot better because they're
they
taught
have
at a
it
young
better,
age
but I mean
not to do this.
but even those places that have it better, it's
Mhm.
still a thing where that they recognize that this is just inherently what people do. People get
Mhm.
stuck in their heads and think
Mhm.
that this is the reality. And I do want to, put a disclaimer out there with all these things that we're talking about of having to, even break manipulative patterns and stuff of what it takes, the self-reflection, the awareness, the stepping out of it. You can't do that for somebody. You can't point them, hey, look, do you see what you're doing? Hey, you're being manipulative. If somebody's really stuck, and especially in some of this darker stuff that we're talking about, gaslighting, gosh, we haven't even touched on the silent treatment yet and how people weaponize that. But some of the more dark, intentional, manipulative tactics, you pointing out what they're doing when they're intentionally doing these things is not going to go well for you. It's going to backfire 99% of cases. That's going to backfire in your face because they're not
It,
interested in that
yeah,
self-reflection.
I mean, it depends on the situation. I mean, I'm not like you can set boundaries to where that does get pointed out. Like if you're in a relationship, obviously you're not going to sit there and tolerate that if you are aware of it. Now, is there a different way of handling that? Yes. Like you're not going to go, well, you said this and this and this, and then you're just screaming at each other in this phase, but you can be like, that wasn't kind. What was that? And not sit there and spiral, but get someone to look in the mirror by your response being calm, well-rounded, and rooted in reality. And that's the only way you get people to even wake up from that a lot of the time, or, saying, hey, can you read that back to me? Do you realize what you just said there? Why don't you stop and reflect for a
And
bit here?
and that's not even pointing out specifically because and I'm talking with the people who are trying to fix
Mhm,
the other person,
mhm.
get them to change, get them to see their own problems. And like you said, boundaries are a great way for people to get, it's that shock to the system, that big thing in their face to go, whoa, what was that? Why did that happen? And
Mhm.
when they have, if there is any kind of reflection, when they go, why did that happen? If they decide to look at themselves, then boom, there's some self-reflection, there's some awareness. A boundary is a very good thing, but going, hey, you're gaslighting me right now, and
Yeah.
no, like trying to massage their shoulders into seeing what they're doing.
And you're not going to get anywhere calling a narcissist a narcissist.
Right.
Definitely. Like that's like there's no point in that. And I think like if someone respects your boundaries, they're already going to want to be better. They're already going to want to take steps to change. It's the people that don't respect your boundaries. And now don't get me wrong, some people that don't even understand boundaries and they might not respect them out of not understanding, which you obviously have room to give people a chance in that space. But usually two things are going to happen when you set boundaries. Someone's going to learn and come back and go, "Hey, I want to know more. What can I do to change?" Or, "Sorry, I didn't respect your boundary. I realized what you were doing there." Or they're going to go and they're going to flip out on you for a boundary. They're going to walk away. They're going to, in some horrible situations, abuse you or whatnot. but that's going to be your signal to know that you're not going to get anywhere with that person. They're not going to change. They're reinforcing their reality. They're reinforcing abuse. They're reinforcing their bad behavior, their bad patterns, and expecting you to go along with it or else. That's manipulation.
I mean, I would say that's one of the best tools for dealing with manipulative people is just boundaries. Because if you set very clear boundaries, people who are very manipulative and you're using some of these tactics that we're talking about, that's like, them trying to find a way around the fence that you
Mhm.
put up, and that's a very good sign if makes red flags very apparent, because if you have no boundaries, you're not going to see a lot of this stuff. But if you have healthy boundaries in your life as just a rule of life of all your relationships, you'll start, why why are you trying to penetrate that boundary? Why? What are you,
Mhm.
it's no different than, having doors on your house. If somebody's coming in and is constantly trying to check to see if your doors are locked to get into your house, probably know their intentions are not very good, right?
Mhm.
So I think boundaries is probably one of the most effective tools to, one, manipulation, but also spot those just red flags in general in relationships and in people in your life.
I think like further even with manipulation is believe what people show you, not what they tell you. I mean,
Mm,
that's something with manipulators is they're going to tell you one thing and they're going to do the opposite. They're not going to keep their word. They're not going to be consistent. They're going to show up maybe for 3 months saying they're going to change and they're right back to doing whatever it is they were doing before. That is something like you shouldn't sit there and go, well, 6 more times they'll get a chance. No, you should really believe what people show you, not what they say,
mm,
or even how you feel around these people. If you're a healthy person and you're learning, you're setting boundaries and you know yourself, when you're around someone, you don't have to know them deeply to get a feel for what is going on around you. Like as human beings, we have electromagnetic fields around us and they go off depending on what someone's state is. This is science. So if you're around someone, like I can tell you, I've gone to like the grocery store or a party and I didn't even know the person, but the minute they come up, I just have this like, ooh, that's a very uneasy feeling, and before you know it, they're sitting there and they're either very egotistical, they're very passive aggressive, they're they're very false incompetence mask on, like they're acting like they're stupid, but you know they're not.
right.
That's where you can go right away. You don't even have to get into some relationship. You don't have to get to know them. You can go, oh yeah, I'm going to walk this way. I'm not even going there with this person. I already know what this is. That's what it should be. That way, if you were a woman or a man going in the dating world or going to get back into a relationship, you're not sitting there waiting around a year to figure out maybe who this person is. No, the sure signs were right in your face in that
Right.
first interaction right there.
Right. And even a step after that one, a really easy tool, a very simple tool to, test these things is just communicating a problem. It's just an accountability thing. Because, in a healthy relationship, if you, and this, no matter what, this is going to happen at some point in a relationship where somebody's going to do something that hurts you or that you don't like, whether it's a side comment or something, or,
Mhm.
hey, we made dinner reservations and this person forgot and went and did something else or whatever. But bringing up an issue and being like, hey, I didn't appreciate that, or hey, that hurt me, and healthy response is a sincere apology. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I dropped the ball on that. An apology and then accountability and then, making a correction.
Yeah, and the apology doesn't sound like I'm sorry you feel that way. Just
Yeah,
me.
no,
That's the
no,
famous
that's
line for manipulators is I'm sorry
I'm
you feel
sorry
that
you
way.
feel that way.
That's
That
not an
that is
apology
that's
at all.
yeah, that's deflection. That's being, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not that I'm sorry. And a really good response to that one is, I don't need you to apologize for my feelings because they're mine. But yeah, a manipulative person will deflect, blame, attack, or even minimize a problem. So that can look something like, this scenario, hey, we had dinner plans and you forgot about it and that really hurt me. It's somebody deflecting. Yeah, well, you didn't remind me, you didn't put it in the calendar, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, like deflect, right? And that's also blame. I'm gonna blame, oh, well, my boss at work was just trashing me today, so that's why it's my boss's fault that I forgot about our dinner plans.
Or even, someone blows up on someone screaming at them and they're just out of control at the
That's the
person.
next
And then
one.
they
They
turn
start
around
attacking
and,
you.
well, then you say, hey, I don't appreciate how you're screaming at me. Well, I wouldn't be screaming at you if you didn't do X, Y, Z. And that's where you go, whoa, there's just decent human respect as a bare minimum when you're
Mm-hmm.
speaking to
Yeah.
someone. And like, don't get me wrong, there's times to raise your voice and stuff, but the belligerent screaming and yelling and then blaming someone for your out of control emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I've been in experiences where you're being screamed in the face and all of a sudden you're being blamed for the person that screamed in your face. And nothing in the situation was warranted, even not even close to being warranted in that. And plus, even if it was, what is that going to accomplish? Like just natural communication and emotional intelligence would fill in there and say that when is screaming until your lungs are shot ever accomplished or change a situation? None of that breeds solution, self-control. I mean, there's so many
That's
examples here.
somebody trying to get, and that's, I mean, we're now going the level. That's just so childish. Children kick and scream and throw a fit in order to try and get control of a situation when they don't
But
feel
they're
safe or
children.
they don't feel under
Children
control.
are allowed to learn these things the
Children
right
are
way.
learning these things. Adults don't have a excuse for this. That's again, there's a there's a reason why it's called childish behavior. Adults shouldn't be, and children are learning how to behave. That's part
And
of
I would just like to
development.
say too, like when it comes to like narcissism, for example, and those dynamics, I mean, that kind of abuse, it doesn't even have to be physical, it can be emotional and mental.
Mm.
And when you get into that zone, that actually damages the other person's brain. Like if you stay in that, it's called intermittent reinforcement. There's studies on it. And you stay in that long enough, your brain gets wired into this to where you stay in the cycle. You can't see out of it. You can lose your health. You can lose like all sense of your own self. It's like
Mm-hmm.
emotional enmeshment to where you won't stand up for yourself. You won't walk away. And when you finally get brave enough to do so, you have to recover and rewire your brain and take radical steps to change how your nervous system has been wired to this situation to where you could be completely out and escape it and have a good life and find yourself almost in a sense feeling guilty and like you want to go back, which doesn't make sense logically if your mind's together, but your feelings are all messed up. And again, that's where a lot of repair needs to happen. But that shows the damage too of being in manipulation long term. It literally will damage your brain. There's studies proving this.
Yeah, and that goes to the last point I want to point out to people about, that accountability test to bring up an issue is people minimizing the problem, which also goes hand in hand with gaslighting, where people who are, like you said, are in that long term will then start to feel like their feelings, their emotions, their well-being in the relationship or in any given situations don't really matter. They're not important, and you always find yourself falling on your own sword, so to speak, because that doesn't really matter. And with the example we gave with missing dinner, oh well, it's not that big of a deal. We can go tomorrow. Like it's not really that big of a deal. Like you hear that long enough for so many years, you start to think that somebody, like you said earlier, just a basic human decency,
Mhm.
like the bare minimum becomes not even a thing anymore. It'd be like, oh, well, missing dinner is just a normal thing. We can just go the next day. After 10 years of that, that's just, you don't think that's a big deal anymore. So you start sacrificing yourself and accepting less than the bare minimum in a relationship because you're accepting people minimizing the problem all the time or minimizing the issue and not taking accountability for it. And those are just some very simple things that people can look at and be like, whoa, that's a red flag. Now that doesn't, and another problem we have right now in society is everybody's calling everybody a narcissist. Everybody's calling everybody, codependent or you're sociopath or you're this and you're that. And people are so worried about labels Just because you might see some of these red flags in somebody doesn't automatically make somebody a narcissist or this or that. But when you're out in the world and meeting new people or getting in relationships, saying some of these things, people can have bad habits, bad problems, stuff that they're in that they need to deal with, and it doesn't necessarily make them a full-blown this or that. But that doesn't mean, you need to accept those poor behaviors either, and you might find yourself repeating the same bad situation that you got out of. So, these are, again, we like to use tools on this show. These are just tools that people can use to spot some of these things, and, make it just a practice thing. It doesn't even have to be people you're close to. Just start practicing to spot some of these things. Use some of these examples that we give and be like, oh wow, I see where that person just did that. I see where that person's just subconsciously doing that. He's not aware that he did it. These other people aren't aware they did it. And I say, just, you can hear it sitting in a restaurant hearing people talk. It's actually
Yeah.
crazy how often you hear that stuff on a regular basis, and you start training yourself to be aware of these patterns and these things that people start doing, and it'll help you in your life.
I also would say, like, not even if you have been told you're this or that, I don't think you can move on to change or heal any patterns in your life if you're taking an identity. Like, for example, you'll hear people say, oh, I have, I think it is CPTSD, narcissistic abuse PTSD for life. I think that's just need to go, you know what, I'm not accepting that. I want to actually heal and I want to change my patterns so I can live the life that I deserve. And, I think you've mentioned, Trey, you've found a couple Instagrams where the guys are like, I'm a diagnosed narcissist, and they're like making reels about it and this and that. That's like, you have awareness that you're a narcissist now, then you should be taking steps to not be one. Go forward, move forward, rewire your brain, acknowledge where you need to change. And yeah, it's brutal, it's hard work. This isn't going to happen overnight, and it's definitely not going to happen without help. I have to say, you have to have help in these situations. And I don't think just talking about it necessarily is going to help in the long run either. You have to just do it, and you have to take steps and discipline to get there.
Yeah.
So,
I'll say that's a really big red flag when somebody's taking ownership of like continual ownership of like narcissism like that. Like, I've been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and I've been in therapy for 6 years, but I'm still a narcissist. And it's like that even goes to the whole playing the victim thing, because then people are like, well, do you know what it takes for somebody to be a narcissist? They're going to be abandoned. They're going to be abandoned by their parents, treated like this, and then it's
oh,
like
and you're
it's
almost marketing yourself now. Like anything I do now, I warned you so I can get away with it. I mean, that's what I
right. That's
see.
like a
Like,
that's like
like
a
that's walking around with a sticker on. I'm a codependent, so just to let you know, I'm going to self-implode all the time and not be vulnerable and, put a fake mask on all the time. And we just need to get away from these labels too. Once you have awareness, you need to take action. You can read all the books, watch all the videos, listen to all the podcasts, but you actually have to apply it. After you do know, do have some tools, you actually have to do it, and it's going to suck.
change is never real change is never easy like that, or else everybody would be doing it all the time. But we appreciate everybody tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know what you want to hear us talk about, and we'll get it in there. So appreciate
I didn't
everybody, and
yell him 20 times this time. It was only like 3 or 4. Hopefully nobody's counting.
well, we will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks, everybody.